Hey everybody, my name is John Anthony Chihawk Soltero, and it's time for another edition of Grade That Comic, the comic book review show in hopefully 10 minutes or less that grades a comic book on a 10.0 mint scale, from 10.0 gem mint all the way down to zero point 0.5 poor. Today's entry is Image Comics' Stray Dogs from Fleeks, Forstner, Simpson, and Rodriguez. This horror genre takes the rule that you don't kill the dog and dumps it on its head. Now, before we get fully started in this, as some of you may know, I am the creator of a comic book called Bubba Patrol, which gives a legacy to my dogs and celebrates them as the heroes that I see them. It is an all ages book. It is very colorful. It is not dark at all. It is going to be filled with some life, true to life experiences, but it's not dark like Stray Dogs. I had been questioning whether or not I should even read this series because of my love for animals and specifically my love for dogs. Now, before I go off on too much of a tangent or too much of a grading concept on this book is executed extremely well. The artwork is Bluthian in nature. That's Don Bluth, for those of you who weren't around during the 80s or were too young to remember some of the great movies like American Tail that had tremendous character designs and the artwork was fluid and expressive. This team produces artwork like that. In fact, for most of these stories, you could take almost all of the dialogue out of it and just leave the visuals, the expressions of the dogs communicating with each other without spoken word, and it would still be equally as effective. That speaks to the quality of this book. But it is dark. And by dark, we're talking We Three dark. We're talking Plague Dogs dark. We are talking Red Rover Charlie levels of dark. And when it comes to animals, unless it's done in a certain light, that doesn't sit really well with this reviewer. Again, not knocking the quality or the cohesion of this project. Just saying, that's going to be a gut punch for me. With that artwork comes the variants. Now, the variants are horror movie poster homages. You've got Scream right here. You've got Annabelle. Issue number 1, first printing horror movie variant was Silence of the Lambs. I believe there's a 7 poster in there somewhere. And it speaks to the creativity. It also speaks to the nostalgia that a lot of indie creators, and not just indie creators, are using with that homage pull. I use it too. It's a great marketing tool. And these are instantly recognizable, even if you've never picked up an edition of Stray Dogs or you've never actually seen the movie Scream. You know that from somewhere. That's a smart pull. But then you've also got the regular covers and the reprints. And I believe issue 1 has gone to a 5th printing. Now, for speculators and secondary market individuals, sometimes that spells doom. Sometimes those next printings jump up because the reprints tend to be smaller than the original printing. But what does that speak to the original printing if there's still this much demand that you're doing 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and even 5th printings of a book? Maybe it was one of those books that hit. Nobody thought much of it when it was being solicited. And after that first issue hit, issue 2 had already been ordered. So people cut their orders naturally. That creates a quagmire in the secondary market because people are scrambling for first prints. And first print of number 1, especially that Silence of the Lambs cover, is going for upwards of $100 right now. I was very fortunate to pick up 2 copies, 3rd printings, I believe, of each, number 1 and number 2, and then picked up 3 and 4 at a local comic shop up in Phoenix from last weekend. So, what does this do for me? I decided to sit down, I decided to read this and take my chances, roll the dice, because I also want to review things. Well, this book is executed extremely well. Storytelling is top notch. And some people may not know Tony Fleeks. Tony Fleeks has been doing comics for years. I actually met him in 2006 at San Diego Comic Con, where he had an autobiographical comic about a day in his life when he was diagnosed with cancer. So there's part of me that has a connection with him. But part of me that disconnects from this was a letter from, I believe, issue 3, where somebody is saying how much they love the story. They'd only read issue 1, and they were really hoping that nothing was going to happen to the dogs. And they responded in that while they didn't intend for anything to be too gratuitous, there are certain things in the story that were just going to have to be told. And I can keep going back to that about how it pulled at me emotionally. That's what media is. Songs pull at you emotionally, whether you like them or you don't. Movies, television shows, there's something about them that either resonate with you or don't. And while this book visually is stunning and extremely well executed, the characters are extremely well developed. They have their own voices, which is something I definitely look for. I like character-driven stories because you could have this insanely great plot and have really dull characters. And if you drop them into that plot, it doesn't mean anything. But you could have a really mundane plot, an everyday plot, slice of life plot. And if your characters are done extremely well and developed, you can put them into any scenario, from like the midst of nuclear war, post-apocalyptic desert America where gas is running low and there's mutants running around, or you can put them at the dinner table and you're going to have a great story. These characters are those characters, because the beginning of the story, you get to see them interacting as they're just welcoming in the new dog. And that new dog is very nervous, and there's something she doesn't quite remember. But along the way, those memories come back, and it's not good. The rule in Hollywood, like I said, was you could kill anybody. You could kill the person in the wheelchair, like they did in Friday the 13th Part 2. You could kill children. There's been plenty of those movies going on. But you don't kill the dog. Now, when you're trying to establish a villain and you're trying to establish somebody that you definitely want to see their comeuppance, you have them do some of the most despicable things. You have them go after the most vulnerable. And what's more vulnerable than a dog that's loyal, trustworthy, trying to get by, and relying on you for survival? Well, if that's your cup of tea, then Stray Dogs is definitely for you. Like I said, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue reading this series or not. It is extremely well executed. And while not viscerally, visually graphic, there are some points in this story that made me stop and want to think about whether or not I wanted to flip that next page. But in a way, that speaks to the execution and how it touched me specifically. So, while some people may not feel that this is a fair grade, part of my grading goes into how did this affect me personally? It can be an extremely well done book, but if it didn't grab me and there was nothing there, was it really that good? So out of a Gem Mint 10.0 possibility, Stray Dogs gets a 9.4. Now remember, a 9.4 is when you pull it right off the rack. That's near mint. So until next time, keep reading comics, and let's hear you in the comments.